Welcome to Meet Me for Coffee. Today I have once again my great friend and somebody I truly admire in the energy world and also as an intuitive cardiologist, my great friend Dr. Nitin Bhatnagar. And today we want to kind of chat about how we can do more than just survive in a lockdown, but actually thrive in a lockdown. So how are you doing there, Nitin?
Good. All is well at my end.
That's awesome to hear. I'm so excited for you to be with me today.
And happy birthday.
Oh, thanks. Let the whole world, the universe know this is my born day. So I want to talk about boosting immunity. How is it going on your end, or what do you muse about when you think about immunity in general?
So going back to understanding what exactly is immunity all about. So, we've got these various sorts of immunity. We've got the, just a little bit of pathophysiology about this. You've got the innate immunity and you've got an adaptive immunity. And innate immunity is what, comes online within the first 1 to 3 days. And then the adaptive immunity comes on 3 days and onwards. And what happens is that your innate immunity is your immediate, like macrophages, and cytokines and all these various parts of your immunity that try to block up your nose, block up your ears, close quick wounds, things like that. Those are the very fast acting. But then they start causing the adaptive immunity to come online. And that's the more deeper, the things like the T cells, the cytokines, and other inflammatory responses. And there's a feedback mechanism that goes back into innate immunity, and they keep talking to one another. But that was the original model that we always understood by immunity. There's another model that is very powerful. It's the microbiome immunity, and your gut has a very powerful immunity, and that is through your bacteria, viruses, of which there are trillions that we have within us. And that is constantly keeping score of what's the bacteria and virus load on the outside of the body, and what's also in the inside of the body. So in the end, it's really a balancing of an equation. And so we think that our senses, we only have 5 senses. We've actually got so far to date almost 110, because if you start incorporating your own immune systems, you start including all the receptors. And these are also part and parcel of our own immunity. So when we talk about immunity, it's not just the innate or the adaptive, but it's also our microbiome. And what they're discovering, and more, is that our microbiome has an intelligence. And what it's constantly doing is not only just understanding what's going on the inside, but it's also seeing what's going on the outside. So in the past, when we talk about immunity, the first thing we think about is antibiotics, right? So because that kind of goes hand in hand in our culture. But the thing is that if you go back to the ancient Greeks, there were 2 different kinds of holistic medicine ideas. One was, if the problem is on the outside of the body, therefore the solution lies on the outside of the body, kind of like the antibiotic issue, right? If the bacteria is on the outside invading in, we take an antibiotic, which is from the outside of us, and kill whatever's going on there. Similarly, the other school of thought, the other medical school of thought, was if the problem actually is within us, then therefore the solution lies within us too. And so that is another whole realm of trying to improve one's immunity. So when we have this balance is a very delicate balance. And so these days, now there's a new research coming out that instead of trying to take care of using an antibiotic to kill a bacteria, what if you find what is the predator of that bacteria, just like in an ecosystem, right?
Right.
Which we're already within us, boost that up and trying to defeat it. So this is a very new way of thinking in the immunological world. Now, why is that coming to focus right now is because the fact that our immunity, building our own immunity within us is extremely key, especially with all these pandemics and all these, and even after the pandemic, when trying to deal with our generally stressful lives.
So what is your call on stress. I know there's different levels of stress, and a lot of the stress is contagious stress because we pick up on other people's environmental stress.
Correct.
So how, like, I mean, I do, like, when I'm feeling out of sorts, I might, for sure, I meditate, or I listen to some chanting or some sounds or some flutes or drumming, or I also just focusing on my breath. What are some ways that you use to deal or, release your stress?
Well, everything you just mentioned as well. So, let's go into that. So what happens is that when we are out of balance, right? When our psychology dictates our physiology, and our physiology then is dictated by our sociology, and sociology is then dictated by our theology. So when our psychology is out of balance, our physiology takes over, trying to remind us of that. So on one hand, when we say, oh, well, you're succumbing to an illness, you may not be looking at an illness. If you look at the symptoms as really being feedback mechanisms to wellness. So on that point, when you go out of balance emotionally or mentally, you end up also creating a whole skew in the milieu of your microbiome, which is the reason why I started off talking about the microbiome. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, you start succumbing to an illness, when you've lopsided the scales in one way or another. So when you start having fears, for example, right? Your stress. What is stress? Stress essentially is a breakdown of an imbalance. So you've got eustress and you've got distress. The eustress is when you're in balance, and you're distress when you're in balance, right? So is there distress when you're out of balance, and eustress is when you're in balance. And when that happens, it's because you've got various perceptions in your mind which you're now projecting onto all your bacteria. So, for example, when you create fears, what are fears? Fears are essentially when you've got an imagined emotion of something that's about to happen in the future, or a memory of a guilt from an experience of the past. Either way, they are in time and space, not aligned, and they're not in the present. So what happens is that when there's a fear, when you have a loss of that which you are infatuated with, or a gain of that which you resent, either way, you are creating an imbalance in your psychology. And that imbalance, your body knows and identifies and recognizes it and embodies, as it were, and your microbiome then responds to that, trying to show you where you're out of balance. So there are many ways of trying to get back into balance. So, you mentioned some beautiful methods. Music. You try to distract yourself from whatever's going on and try to get you out of that moment, and then try to figure out how to get back in. So, journaling, getting back into a state of gratitude. You end up trying to exercise. So exercising is very helpful to boost your immunity, boost your cytokines, boost all the hormones that really try to get your immunity back online. And when you have your imbalance, you've got your two systems in your nervous system, right? You've got your sympathetic system, your fight or flight, or your parasympathetic, rest and digest. And what happens is that going back ages, you've got your red blood cells, for example, right? Your red blood cells don't have a nucleus inside it. Your white blood cells, for immunity building, have nuclei in it. Now, in the daytime, you're out and about, you're working, you're playing or doing whatever it is out in the real world, right? And what happens is that when that's the case, you've got your RBCs that are more out there. But remember, you're also being exposed to radiation in the sun. And if that's the case, you don't want your nuclei to be destroyed, which is why RBCs, red blood cells, don't have nuclei. Because when you're out there, you get exposed to the sun and they can be destroyed. And your sympathetic comes online. And if you're, let's say, infatuated, you're upset, you're emotionally charged, that keeps driving up and your imbalances continue in that direction. Now look at it in the opposite way when you look at your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. Right? When you fall ill, what do? You get inside the bed, you curl up, and you rest. Right? The reason for that naturally is because When your parasympathetic comes online, all your white blood cells come online, which is at nighttime, because they're not being exposed by radiation. The nuclei can be there. They're much larger cells. They're more openly exposed. And so therefore they can now release all these other things off the T cells and the macrophages and cytokines and so on. But this whole cascade, the interleukins, and do that in order to bring you back and get your immunity back online. So if that's the case, if you're able to keep your parasympathetic, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic in line at all times, you're going to maintain your immunity at all times. Make sense? So when that ends up happening is that, when you've got too much of challenge, your sympathetic system keeps on going, and your support system is not there enough. When you if that happens, you end up becoming precociously independent. But if you end up becoming too much of support, too much of parasympathetic, not enough sympathetic, not enough challenge, right? You become juvenile dependent. But only at support and challenge equality do you actually grow and you build your immunity. And the more you grow your immunity, you move forward.
So I love that. When I just listening to you between the two, so I was just thinking about in Chinese medicine, the elements, right? So fire is the red blood circulation. What do you do during the day? That's like the peak of fire, yang energy. And metal, Venus circulation, is the decline of yang and the rise of the yin. So just having balance within the elements. And I always incorporate them with the body through the skin. But also, I like how our mind gets involved. I always like to be mindless and pay attention to our feelings more, right? Because your feelings are a state of awareness where when you're mindless through the experience and the memories and those things that might be disruptors to our emotional state of awareness, and tune into our feelings a little more. Like for me, through this whole, and I'm a healthy person anyway, I focus more on the optimistic venue of the world versus the chaos and the fear stuff. So I like to I think that's where the meditation and the breath work come in, where I literally am having conversations with different conscious states of awareness through my breathing cycle to just balance out both of those systems.
It's very interesting you mentioned about that. So talk about the breathing for a second. So meditation extremely important, and there are lots of different kinds of meditations that I have done, and it depends upon, are you coming from a space of fear, and are your feelings imbalanced? When you get your feelings back in balance, remember your feelings are there to guide you, to show you what's going on out of balance. If either your heart rates are going, your heart rate is fast, your breathing becomes either shallow or deep, your blood pressure changes. These are all mechanisms to show you where you may be out of balance. Meditation is very powerful to be able to bring one quickly back into balance. In fact, I teach that to my patients, to be able to get their breathing back into balance, because your breathing is connected to your mind is connected to your breathing. So I'll give you an example. Have you noticed that at times, where if you're very excited, you're very passionate about something, and you're looking forward to an event or whatever the case might be, your breathing pattern changes, where you end up having a deeper inspiration and shorter expiration. The expiration is more shallow, right? That's also a state of infatuation when you're going in that state. When you're more depressed, your expiration prolongs and your inspiration shortens. So therefore, just like the old adage, right? The sigh of depression, right? So when that happens, you're more resentful. And so that, either one is not equal, those aren't equal states. But one-to-one breathing, one-to-one inspiration and expiration brings you back into balance. So back to your original point, how do you get yourself back into some degree of balance? Some people listen to music, and I listen to solfeggio frequency music, and I listen to that pretty much throughout the day. I just keep it playing in the background, and that just sort of keeps my thoughts more focused, as it were. Plus, also there's meditation practices, staying in gratitude, and doing your one-to-one breathing. just as an interesting anecdote, because I have to wear masks during, seeing patients in the office these days. I will tell you that I have, without a doubt, seen huge changes in physiology because of the masks. I've got, people are wearing masks, and they're very uncomfortable. They keep saying, "Hey, I can't breathe. I'm more short of breath." And so in the office, I'll tell them, "Take off your mask, and we'll have a conversation." And then suddenly their breathing becomes more adjusted. The best example of this is I've seen people with lower heart rates. I have seen people with very high blood pressures, all because of wearing masks. Just today alone, I saw a lady whose blood pressure was 180/80, which is very high. And this lady doesn't have usually a history of high blood pressure. So it was just very bizarre. And she wasn't really that nervous to see me. I've seen her a bunch of times. Anyway, so I said, "You know what? Take off your mask." I took off her mask, and I waited a couple of minutes, and I checked it again. Normal. Right after that. And she said, "I'm feeling better. My headache is gone." So the mask actually, the reason I bring that up is because the mask is disrupting this one-on-one flow. So we naturally, when we're in our balanced states, we have a one-to-one inspiration, expiration. But by suddenly, closing our mouths, right, with our mask, we are externally forcing a change. And invariably, the moment you take off your mask, you have to take a deep breath in. Because what's happened is that you've gone so low and resentful, you now have to go the other way to go back into your balanced state.
So, I mean, I've noticed that with the masks myself, like out of habit. Like, for example, if I'm talking to somebody or someone's talking to me, it's almost like my mind receptor, I can't hear what they're saying unless I take the mask off my mouth, which is hilarious when you start to recognize it and be like, "Oh, I can't hear you because there's a mask over my mouth." But then even to talk to people, they can't hear you because there's a mask over your mouth. So you have this interesting dichotomy going on as well. But yeah, that's interesting. Just the different, I think you even made a comment about one of your clients lost weight because he's wearing the mask.
Right, because he was saying essentially that if I'm wearing the mask all the time, where am I going to get a chance to go eat food? So simply by not eating any food because there was a mask in its place, he ended up shedding a ton of weight, which was very surprising. So there are benefits and there are drawbacks.
Absolutely, for sure. So I want to talk about just during your immunity. So I know you do fasting. How often do you do fasts during the year?
So every day I attempt for a 16 to an 18-hour fast. So that's part of the intermittent fasting. I try for once a week, as long as I'm not on call or whatever the case might be, one day a 24-hour. And as you may recall, back in February, I ended up doing a 12-day water-only fast. So I'm hoping to do that later on towards the end of the year again, if I can.
So, because I kind of tried to do that twice a year during, right before the spring season, do a clean out, like spring cleaning, and again in the fall. So what about different foods to boost your immunity because, they're saying this is going to be another wave coming. So I think it's better to be pre-prepping of boosting the immunity instead of waiting till all of a sudden the door opens to chaos.
So, yeah, that's a lovely question. So there are lots of different foods that boost immunity. So if you've got foods that are rich in vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin D, and especially right now, you go outside, you're going to get plenty of vitamin D and sunlight and more exposure, then you also boost your immunity because vitamin A, C, and D are very valuable vitamins to help boost your immunity. The other thing is staying hydrated. Remember, you're 70% water. So your cells need to be fully nourished and loved, as it were. And as you do that, there are other things which you can do. Is there are a whole host of, they say echinacea, mushrooms. If you eat a balanced diet and not go overboard in one or the other, right? You're not just going heavy on carbs or heavy on fat, and you're keeping you've got your adequate amount of protein, and they're all in appropriate amounts, and you're eating your foods that have got superfoods in them, for example, but you're having your adequate amount of almonds and cashews and so on. And if you're allergic to it, find something else. There's Mother Nature has given us a wide plethora of things to be able to explore. But if you do that and you stay hydrated and plenty of sunlight, you're going to be able to, from a nutritional standpoint, be able to boost your immunity. And the other thing is actually, watch out for sugar, because sugar is one of the most volatile substances out there. So if you're going to be putting things into your body that are going to help and nourish your temple, as it were, right? Then in that case, then try to exclude things that are going to destroy it. So excessive caffeine, smoking, excessive alcohol. Everything in moderation is, except for smoking, is adequate. I mean, if somebody starts to just keep on drinking alcohol, they're going to pickle themselves, but they're going to start destroying various organs. Because every organ has their own, and now we're discovering a new thing, which is every organ system has their own whole microbiome network. And each network has to communicate with another network, and so on. And all of these various microbiome networks have to then finally end up communicating with the nervous system network. And that then communicates with your brain network, which is another whole system. And then that has to communicate with your heart, which is another brain system. And your microbiome in your gut is another brain system. So, there are lots of these intelligence within us, but to wipe it all out by bad eating habits, destructive health habits, won't help your immunity.
So what do you I know they recommend like zinc. So do you recommend like purchasing zinc in a capsule or liquid form, or just try find it through eating organically through food?
I would say eating it organically through food. The best way to process any of these things is eating enough of everything. Some people talk about, taste the rainbow, right? If you're eating a full spectrum of the colors. Actually, it's very interesting. If you read farm medicine and try to understand the concepts of that, there are these beautiful primers that have been written on farm medicine, on what foods actually provide nourishment, because every color of every food actually has a certain property. Just now if you add that and study color medicine, you end up discovering how there may be certain colors within your spectrum, which is essentially different frequencies that may be missing or emitted due to lifestyle or stress or whatever the case might be, lacks in your immunity, right? You can bring those back in through meditation, color meditation, and also bring it back through proper foods, because those foods have that color frequency. So I would say eat. And because if you let's say cannot eat a particular food and you can't get zinc from something, then fine, you can have a supplement. But it is far better for you to be able to do it through real food.
So what about through the COVID, like I try to exercise at least 4 times a week. Like my goal is like a 5-mile maximum or minimum through my day. So what kind of exercise? For me, I think it just depends on the person and their own body. Like I used to do a lot of yoga, but I find now that I literally need like cardio just to clear up my mind more than the yoga. And I don't know if I do that because I don't listen to music or anything when I'm driving. I just am in the silence, and I sleep outside anyway. So I listen to nature, right? So I find like just being on the treadmill or out walking or moving that way is better for me because I'm more of an action kind of move kind of girl. So what other, I know there's yoga, Pilates, what other things as far as exercise for people to help boost their immune system?
So it depends upon your age and your own athletic ability. So biking helps, swimming does, and running, walking, any kind of movement will start getting the wheels of your body moving. I do CrossFit, and that helps me tremendously. But during this time period, I have not been doing all the heavy CrossFit lifting. I have actually toned back that down for the last couple of months, simply because my body does not need that at the moment, and I'm not doing any bulk training, competition training, anything like that. So therefore, I've just been doing focusing on all my small muscle groups, things that I don't get a chance to do during regular CrossFit season. Doing a lot more stretching, a lot more joint mobility, and shoulder mobility, hip mobility, things like that. So, but it's yet keeping active, and I'm constantly walking around, whether it's in the hospital or outside. Now, in the hospital, it's simply because I'm in the hospital and I have to do that. But keeping mobile, and even when I'm at my desk, if I have to dictate a note or whatever, I'm standing up, or I'm doing squats while I'm dictating, or I'll go into the bottom of a squat and hold that squat for like 3 minutes, because I know that's how long it'll take me to dictate my note. Right. So therefore, I'll be, and I keep my the heels planted, my back straight, the shoulders out, and while I'm dictating, and I'm sitting on the floor doing that. But that's just me, because I'm using every moment I can to stay mobile. So there's a phrase that I tell my patients is that bodies at rest will be laid to rest, bodies in motion will stay in motion. So and that basically tells them, get up and start doing some exercise. And let's say if you're elderly and you can't do it, do whatever you can, but do it. The less excuses you have, the better.
Oh, yeah. I think, yeah. There's a lot of people that like those excuses of why they can't do something instead of why they can do something. So how do you, I know in one of, in boosting your immunity, you talk about grounding. So how could grounding boost somebody's immunity? Just in general, grounding.
Oh, it's extremely powerful. Whether you do grounding, whether you're in a bathtub with salt, like Himalayan salt, or you're going outside and being connected to the earth, you are connecting yourself to nature. You are depolarizing your own all your own cells by connecting to, like you're like essentially a lightning rod. If you think about it, we're constantly with our phones and EMFs and our laptops, our television, our cars, our refrigerators, our microwave, which doesn't mean to say that we're afraid of all our technology. It just means to be more aware of it and be able to realize, okay, now is the time where I'm not going to stay onto my phone. I'm going to now go do something else better for myself. I'm going to boost my immunity in a different way. I'm going to see my food as medicine and make conscious choices and conscious living. And so therefore, when you do grounding, that's just another opportunity for you to do that. And whether you're sitting outside and meditating, or when you're sleeping and meditating outside, but connecting yourself to the earth is very powerful. Just as like a lightning rod grounds itself through its negative ions and positive ions, the whole everything comes down to center, and neutral, gets back to neutral. It's all about getting back to neutral. Everything in the universe is trying to get us back to center, back to balance, back to neutrality. Even if you look at in chemistry, if you look at the periodic table, right? You've got the noble gases on one side, and you've got everything else on the other. And everything, your magnesium, your sodium, your whatever it is in the periodic table, is trying to get back to the noble gas state, which is inert, because those are the cardinal, original elements of the universe, the fabrics of the universe. Yes, we talk about hydrogen and so on. Yeah, true, but they've all originated at some point from the noble gases, because your noble gases are the center point of all elementals, and everything comes from that. So it's about getting yourself back into balance, and that comes to the point of, we talked about food as boosting your immunity, hydration and vitamins and grounding, but there are a lot of other things. It's by changing your perceptions. So if you're staying in a state of I'm not enough, and you're putting everybody else on a pedestal, or I am too much, I am better than everybody else, and you put everybody down, so you're on a pedestal and everybody is in a pit, as it were, right? You start ending up creating all these imbalances, because as you suggested earlier, was that the moment you try to stay in one polarity, you're going to attract the other to bring yourself back into balance. So I love it when people tell me, well, I just want peace. Well, I tell them, all right, well, last time when you were looking for peace, how much peace did you get? Oh, I didn't get any peace at all. I said, all right, how about you trying to be positive all the time? Oh, yeah, I'm very positive. I love that state of being positive. I said, okay, did you note how much other things happened to you during those times? And then they started remembering all the negative situations that happened to them. And if you remember, the more negative you are, and you'll agree that people will suddenly come to you and try to lift you up, or things will happen that will lift you up automatically. These are all unseen, automatic forces in the universe trying to bring you back into balance. That's why I don't look for positivity. I look for balance. I don't look for negativity. I look for balance. So because if I can see both sides of any argument, I stay in balance, and therefore I am not going to be as volatile with my emotions, and ergo boost my immunity, if that makes sense. So it's about looking at the entire playing field and being able to stay not necessarily neutral, but in balance. Because if you say neutral, sometimes one would say, well, then you're going to be in inaction. No, that's not the case. If you're truly, and then which comes to another whole concept of when you're inspired, but that doesn't come until you become balanced.
So, I mean, I love perspective and perception, right? So it's like two sides of the same coin. Our perception might be that same side is A, but it's reflective of B, which then equals to C and goes back and forth. And I find like I'm not really, when people bring up an opinion, it's like, well, your perspective is this. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just this person has a different perspective. And for me, I try to open their eyes to see it differently. But a lot of it, as far as that, I've noticed goes back to an experience, like you said before, an experience or a memory of something that happened in their childhood, say, or whatever experience. And then they reflect and assume it's going to circle back again instead of having a new perspective of it. So where it's not so negative, right? It's more like a message or a knowing or a shift or a change, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So so what are some different perspectives or perceptions that you've noticed with this virus with people besides the emotional state?
So you mean from the standpoint of what's actually going on there?
Yeah, exactly.
So the point is that we are constantly being pushed into a narrative, and we are the cure for the flu was the coronavirus. The cure for the coronavirus was all the riots, and God knows what the cure for the riots is going to be. It's always about a narrative, and we're just jumping from story to story to story. But the problem is that whose story are we jumping into? Because the question is, are we actually in somebody else's narrative, and we're just playing along? We're just the characters of their book that they're writing on the pages of humanity. And so that's what I see with this coronavirus. If you look at all the statistics, don't take New York as a side, because that was a hot spot when everything happened, right? But if you look at the whole country, for example, the death rate for this whole thing is about 0.4 to 0.5%, which flu, in fact, is even higher. So if we were supposed to shut down anything, why didn't we shut down our country for the flu every year? Why are we not shutting down for all the other diseases? Why are we not shutting it down for all the other epidemics and pandemics like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, ADHD, all these other things that are happening that actually have more long-term and chronic effects? So people's perceptions of this thing have really been because they're not actually looking and seeing who's writing the narrative. And that I find is actually the most disturbing thing, because what these people who have written this amazing saga, as they keep going from narrative to narrative, is basically that the masses are very easy to control. And everybody will just follow simply whatever they're being told. I see people in cars by themselves wearing a mask. Why? I've had patients, by the way, who've had heart attacks wearing a mask while driving because their oxygen level drops. They've got underlying heart disease that was never really surfaced. And then they end up having a heart attack and crashing the car. So, and that's just like one example of so many other examples of things that I've been seeing, at least in even the cardiac world. I've seen heart failure, I've seen high blood pressure, I've seen pulmonary high blood pressure, known as pulmonary hypertension. There are so many, including, for example, a cardiomyopathy, where the whole heart destructures and starts to drop its heart function. And their heart function normally is like 60%. Now it drops to 30%. And we're not finding it necessarily, they're not because of a blocked artery. It's probably because of the fact that there's so much of fear and all the stress. So in terms of the perceptions, is that we are looking at an outside issue that's affecting us without seeing looking at the other side of the coin. As you just mentioned, that we said look at the other side of the coin. How has this coronavirus actually helped us? What are the benefits of this coronavirus? Where many are disengaging from other toxic relationships, and they're having to spend more time by themselves at home. Many people, yes, they've lost their job, but the benefit is they can spend time with their family. Some people are not having to go to work, but they also had toxic relationships at work. Now they're having a time to reflect. So this is actually a beautiful chance for humanity to be able to reflect on what's been going on. Because in some fashion, we've created this virus on some level. But whether you believe the fact that there are certain nefarious individuals who have actually created this virus in the lab, along with a whole bunch of other viruses for the last several years, or you realize, wait a minute, but they created it because we were trying to find ourselves, but we were not able to do so. Now they've created the virus inherently, pushing ourselves to do and find that path.
Well, and actually it goes back to what you said before. It's this virus and a reality or a perspective is bringing everybody back to balance to be who they really are anyway. It kind of put everyone in a timeout or a pause.
Yeah. Timeout. Yeah, I like that.
We're in a timeout. We are in a cosmic timeout to be who we are, find out what our heart loves, start journaling and reflecting some more. Just everything you said, you're paying attention more to what you're eating because maybe you don't have enough money to go buy whatever. You got to make it last longer. And the mask thing, I've seen people driving down the road with the mask on as well. And again, like for myself, within 10 minutes, I have a headache from wearing it. Mm-hmm. So what are some other, like for me, like it's like to find your soul-inspired self, self-love, which you've talked about before, and different ways to journal. Like, I know we always talk about a gratitude journal, which I think is amazing, but I find a lot of people, to go into a zone of what they're truly grateful for, sometimes they miss the step and they don't, I guess they're not digging deep enough in a way just to be grateful for what they do have instead of what they don't have. Have you experienced any of that?
Yes. So the way I teach gratitude journaling to my patients is, and what I do for myself, is a twofold process. One is, well, actually a threefold, but the first part is, be grateful. So every evening, sit down and write down a minimum of 5 things that happened to you that day, that you're grateful for. And, you mentioned, they're not finding the deeper stuff. Well, you'll find the deeper stuff if you start being grateful for the simpler stuff. So you start being grateful for the absolute simple things. So I was able to reach home. I have a roof over my head. Tangible things that you even start off with. Did not get a speeding ticket. Was able to eat my food. I have food that I can eat. I have taste buds that can even taste it. I have a digestive system that can even process in. When you start getting more detail and detail and detail, that's how you go deeper into those gratitude levels. But you start off with something as simple as I have a chair to sit on. I have a phone that I can call somebody with. And I tell people to start off with just 5 things that happened to that day, and then the following day try to play the game. Let's do 10. Some of them can be repeats, some of them cannot. Don't be repeats, and you keep expanding this and do it for 30 days, and just do this as much as you possibly can. And that is what I tell at the end of the evening. Do that. Then I say, second part is sit down and see all of the things that you would that you expect to have in your life that you will be grateful for. So they haven't happened necessarily, right? But you're going to create that. And every day in the morning, start off with that. And when you start off with that, you are starting to you're projecting out to yourself. And it may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen in a week, may not even a month, maybe not even a year. But you keep doing it, it will happen, because you are now connecting back to a future version of yourself and bring that into focus. The third aspect is look at all the things that you disliked and be grateful for every one of them. But that takes a lot more work. That's why I said start organic with the very first one. And the more you start beginning with the tangible, you start becoming more appreciative of the intangible. So in my gratitude journaling, yes, I started off with home, food, wife, kids, job, car, city, then state, country, then the globe, solar system, planets, universe, stars, and so on. But that's how you expand outwards. And then from there, I collapse the whole thing, and then I start going per system within my body, all my organs, all the functioning organs, then all my senses, for example. Right. So with the ear, I said, thank you for the ear. So this is the hearing organ. Thank you for the fact that it works, that I can hear things, and also for the beautiful things that I can hear, like the sound of my daughter singing, things like that. So if you go through and you go deeper and deeper and deeper, now you start going into this lifetime, a previous lifetime, and you break that barrier of going in deeper.
So, like, as an energy healer, what I've been doing for myself is I've been placing different crystals just based on feeling on just a couple of my energy centers, and then listening to the sound of Om, or like you said, different frequencies or songs. And that has actually been really not just insightful, but like take your breath away, cosmic galaxy kind of healing that way. That's what I've been doing, which normally I haven't been doing that. But now that it's summer here and I can sleep outside, I just feel like the energy from the galaxy, the cosmos, is easier connected to those crystals. So when I place them, I'm in my own little vortex or my own little power shield, whatever you want to call it. Do you recommend any of that for your clients?
Absolutely. If that calls to them, absolutely. Sound healing is very powerful. Crystal healing is very powerful as well. And absolutely. I have crystals as well on my altar, and I use them whenever I'm feeling out of sorts. I need an extra boost of some sort, something or the other. With me, at all times, I have a rose quartz crystal in my pocket, and I don't go anywhere without it. It's because crystals have their own vibrational frequency of healing, and they are an entity within themselves. Let me ask you this question: have you seen Thor or any of those movies, the Avengers? Do you remember in Thor they talk about the various realms? Right there, so the Thor comes from the Asgard realm, and then the ice giants that come from a different realm, and then this is actually in Nordic mythology. There are various realms. But if you dig deeper, and okay, that's Hollywood aside, let's just really go into the mythology of it. So, what are these realms? The realms are actually on this amazing tree of life. There are various stages, there are various branches on this cosmic tree of life. Now, from a metaphysics standpoint, we can call them dimensions, and those dimensions start off with the first dimension in our iron core Earth. Okay, that's the first dimension, and then beyond the iron core, from the iron core to the crust, there's a second dimension. So, but that's where all your minerals, your crystals, and organisms lie. And then you've got the current third dimensional, then you've got your fourth and fifth, and then you keep on going. And the ninth dimension culminates in our central sun, also known as our black hole. So when you mention about the vortex is actually the axis that connects all 9 dimensions. And you can access through using your crystals that help you from the 2nd dimension to get into your 5th dimensional heart space and to be able to elevate all the way up to other dimensional frequencies. To all, you've got in between. You've got Sirius, you've got Pleiades, you've got all Andromeda. You've got all these various galaxy centers, all the way that connect you on this tree of life, from its roots to the tip, to the branches, to your center of galaxy. And it is a very powerful energy, which also explains why whenever there are these various gateway shifts, like we're going to have another one on 8-8, the powerful gateway, the Lion's Gate gateway, I think it is, right? Is it that's the Sirius gateway, if I'm not mistaken? I think that's what it is. But then we're also going to be affected by whatever is going on locally within our solar system. When we have a solar eclipse, like tomorrow, that's affecting our energetic fields. Your lunar eclipses, your full moons, your new moons. These are our local issues at the 4th dimensional frequency. But we also are electromagnetic, as are these heavenly bodies, celestial bodies. And so therefore there's that interaction. But it's that interaction that causes our electromagnetics just to be heightened enough to be able to open that space for awareness to be able to get to another level. So your crystals, we started off this with crystals, they're from the 2nd dimensional frequency, right, from the crystal kingdoms, and they are there for our help, and we can connect to them equally. So sound frequency, light therapy, so you can be out there in the sun. It was funny is that, not to be political, but Trump had said about maybe we can do something about having light within us. Remember the whole UV light thing, which the masses went all crazy and said, oh, well, you want us to swallow a light bulb and then drink disinfectant, and it just went totally nuts. However, if you actually look at the science behind it, right, there's actual real science behind it. In Europe, the way they clean the subway trains is using UV light. You can go to hotels, and I have my own UV wand. You can clean the bed with a UV wand. And Russia is now actually creating and testing how to be able to do particle light and then be able to put it in to cause a disinfectant within us. So there's UV light is very important. So light frequency is important. The sound frequency is important. Crystal healing is important. But in the end, all of this is trying to get us back into our balanced state, right? So if we stay in an inspired state, which basically means doing the things that we love truly doing, do what you love and love what you do. And if you stay in your inspired state, which is following things that your most high value goals of which you love to do, right? If you fill your day with high priority actions, you'll stay inspired. Otherwise, if you don't, then your day will be filled with low priority distractions and then keep you despired. So if you end up staying inspired, you will also boost your immunity because you'll also stay in your sense of balance. And the more you stay in a sense of balance, the more you end up with gratitude. The more you have a state of gratitude, the more you open up a state of love. And the more you are, you've got certainty and presence of the mind and enthusiasm and inspiration of the body, you open up the gratitude and love of the heart. And these are some of your pillars of healing. I mean, you as a healer, if you remember, whenever you take care of one of your clients, the more inspired you feel, the more grateful that you're able to help somebody, right? Do you not be able to help that person even more? So, same exact thing. If you're staying in your state of your 4 pillars, if you will, or 6 pillars, but love, gratitude, certainty, and presence, you're a healer. And so, if you can heal else, heal within. That's how you boost your immunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I work with chromotherapy, so I work with light. I work with fluid stimulation based on the 5 elements, where you hone in on different circulations, whether it's water circulation, lymphatic circulation. I find is huge, and I also work on the acupuncture points with vibration, frequency, and light. and crystals, depending. And I use tuning forks, it all depends on the person. So what I found for myself energetically, whether I'm working with essential oils or chromotherapy, it depends on their cosmology of what's going to actually raise their frequency or shift them. And sometimes it is with food. I work with people as their diet as well. I hate the word diet, to be honest. I like a nutrition quotient. Like, what is your nutrition quotient? You know, your body won't lie to you. It speaks another language. You just have to start speaking that language as well. And then as far as the cosmic galactic frontier, I feel, this is just my perception of this whole COVID thing and a bunch of other things, is that these planets are trying to communicate as well through different timelines. And I feel like we've put so much stuff under the carpet that we need this time out. And we're going to come back to, like, to clean up the debris, we'll say, the foreign energy, the gunk, the karma, whatever you want to call it, to where it's pushing us forward to heal what we've done in the past so we can move forward and change to that balanced frequency. And it's a lot of the planets right now. It's not just Pluto and Capricorn, Saturn, who's shifting back and forth between Aquarius. Mercury just went retrograde. We have Venus finally is coming out. I mean, there's so much on top of these lunar eclipses and the solar eclipse. And then we got the Lion's Gate. So it's just like this shoe shimmy in a way that people, you know, when you talk about the history in history books, you kind of need to look at the history of the planets as well and what happened when those planets merged. The last time Saturn and Pluto merged in Capricorn was when we had that plague. The last time Saturn and Pluto merged in Scorpio, that's when AIDS came out. So these planets are sending us messages. It's just the history of them hasn't really come, you know, played with together. And it used to be that astrology and astronomy, you had to be an astronomer, know the planets, and astrology, both together. Even to practice medicine, you had to understand the planets. To where I think when you start putting these pieces all together and this layering, you can kind of see how the shift right now feels very scary because we don't know what's on the other side. But I've been telling my clients there's always magic on the other side of fear.
Agreed.
So what I mean, do you see that kind of playing into this COVID thing as well, the galaxy part? I know I kind of go out there on that.
No. There is wisdom in what you're saying. Because our planet holds an immense amount of history embedded within its rocks, embedded within every tree, within every element that we have in our planet. It does not mean to say that it's not also there on a galactic level, right? So just like we have our own imprint of our own memories, right? The universe has its memories, but it will have that in the form of various planetary positions and shifts and so on. And remember, we're also being exposed to not just our planets, but we're also being exposed to the solar winds. We're also being exposed to, as our entire solar system is traveling around the black hole, right? And also as our own black hole is traveling around the Virgo cluster, and our own cluster as it's traveling around another supercluster, and as that supercluster is going around in part of the giant Linnaic cluster as well, right? So throughout all of this, right, it's all basically pinpoints of light that is being scattered, and each pinpoint of light is an expression of divine source. So our very tiny version of who we are is also that very minuscule impression. If you remember, do you remember the old in back in the 80s? They used to have those these fiber optics. Those are strands, and they would be in like a fan position, and you would plug it in, and every little pinpoint would have a different kind of color. And over the course, it was just like a decoration that you would keep, and then it would just keep on changing. You would just change a beautiful yellow, then a green. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And then I remember that as a kid, and I used to love trying to touch that and play with that. And it wasn't until recently I understood what exactly that kind of represented for me. Was every one of those tiny little points of light was one of us. And each strand is our connection back to the main part of that box. So we're all just simply pinpoints expression scattered throughout the universe. And if you realize that how much time it takes for our planet to go around its sun, and for us to go around the black hole, well, obviously, we're going to experience various things throughout time and space. We will live, we will die, we will be reborn, and keep on doing this. And so, therefore, we'll also be bringing with us, within our DNA, other lifetimes, ourselves, and others. So you might have been born in some fashion in somebody else, and I might have been the same. But we may have had a connection back at that time, and now we're reliving it in this time. We'll keep on doing this. But the reason why it becomes painful is if we don't actually clear up whatever the karmic shifts are. And so that goes actually all the way back to what you said about the galactic connections, because this is going, if you watch that whole spectrum of it's happening across time and space.
Yes.
And therefore all lifetimes is all microscopic fragments of light. So yes, I do believe exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, for me, this is like, oh, we're cleaning up our cosmic mess from generations and lifetimes, centuries before, all of it different, even like the American Revolution, slavery, the plague, like all these different things over different times. Or like
go back even further. Why even stop there?
Rome, exactly.
Go back all the way to the Atlantic. Go back to the Lion Kingdom, the Elysian Kingdom, the Atlantis, Lemuria. You go back to all these areas, and eventually, if you go back far enough, you come to the final one wound that began it all, which is the wound of separation.
Right. And
that wound of separation is very powerful, and that is what we're trying to discover and understand and learn. When you're a mom, and when a child comes out of the mom, it cries. It's its first breath, and we on one hand we laugh, and when we hear the baby crying, we're like, yay, yay. But we're not looking at it from the baby's perspective. How do you know it's not crying? Because it's just now lost its separation. It's now going into a separation state, and it's not happy about it. Looking at it from it's now it's going to be exposed to temperature, light, gravity, sight, sounds. Everything is just too much, and then smells, and it just doesn't know what to do with it, and it cries. But yet we look at it from the perspective of, oh, look how beautiful it is. It is crying. It is making a noise, and da 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 da. But at some point, we suddenly finally say, okay, enough. Stop crying. Right. Because in some fashion, now that triggers our own emotion of when we never processed that.
Yeah, through space and time. I totally get it. That's just what I see. So I kind of just wanted to ask you what you were seeing as far as like the whole collective consciousness, because that is what I see. I'm like, this is like galactic shift from, like you said, centuries, life, like go clear back. And then to shift it and hopefully go forward in a more balanced outlook.
Right. Because the more dense energies that you break apart and let go, the lighter you are. The lighter you are, the higher you can climb and ascend on the tree of life into different dimensional spaces.
Absolutely. So is there anything else you want to share with my audience today, Nitin?
No, it's just, simple things about, as we're going through, right now we're going through the corona. Whether you're going to go through another wave or not, it goes back to the whole narrative thing, which is who are you going to listen to tell you that the numbers are going up? Because clearly from all the experience that we've just had, all these numbers have been totally fabricated. No, it's just, it's simple things about, as we're going through, right now we're going through the corona. Whether you're going to go through another wave or not, it goes back to the whole narrative thing, which is who are you going to listen to tell you that the numbers are going up? Because clearly, from all the experience that we've just had, all these numbers have been totally fabricated in every country. Whether the death rates have been fabricated, the hospitalizations, the amount of infections, the whole thing is, who are you going to believe? So instead of trying to believe outside, believe in yourself, connect back to yourself, stay inspired, do the things that you want to do, have an adequate amount of hydration, diet, get yourself in a purely beautiful state of gratitude, clean up your own inner wounds, your own inner junk, and let it come out. And if you need to find somebody to help you support that, go right ahead and do that. But you need to be able to get out of your own way to be able to move forward. And the more balanced you are, and the more that you see how things are happening are actually on the way of your progress, not in the way of your progress, right? You will end up discovering the state of unconditional love, which is what we're all striving for. And all that together will boost your immunity. And this is a great time to dump any habits that you've been wanting to get rid of.
Absolutely.
Sugar, smoking, et cetera, et cetera.
Couldn't agree more with all of that, actually. So once again, my great friend Nitin Bhatnagar, an intuitive cardiologist. I'll have information on how you could get a hold of Nitin in the show notes. And as always, Ashe, and I will see you on the other side.